In a village far from the hustle and bustle of the city, there is an old house known by the locals as the Rumah Tumbal Pesugihan. Known for the spooky stories surrounding it, no one dares to approach it, let alone live there. The villagers believe that the house is inhabited by spirits who are willing to sacrifice their souls as sacrifices to gain wealth. One night, a group of young men who are obsessed with mystical things decide to explore the place. All the scary stories and warnings only make them more excited. The night chosen is a full moon night, when the moonlight is brightest, piercing the darkness. When they arrive in front of the house, the atmosphere feels strange. The wind rustles as if warning them to think twice. However, the challenge is too tempting. Bravely, one by one, they step into the room full of dust and mysterious shadows. In the dilapidated house, there are various relics that hold old memories, old furniture, cracked paintings, and dusty suitcases. In the corner of the room, they find an old journal, which becomes the first clue in uncovering the mystery of this house. The journal was written by a former resident who tried to explain the rituals of Pesugihan. As they read, tension began to arise, as if there was something that answered their curiosity. The journals they held detailed the ritual that had led many to their greed. It all started with a desire for instant wealth. In the notes, there was a description of the sacrifice that had to be made, the sacrifice of the soul of someone who meant a lot to the person performing the ritual. The young men were shocked. How could anyone be so reckless? As they continued their exploration of the house, they found old photographs of villagers who had disappeared. The smiling faces and wooden frames now looked eerie in the dim light. Curiosity overcame their fear, as strange voices echoed through the house, enticing whispers that beckoned them to stay and investigate further. As the night wore on, the atmosphere inside the house turned eerie. Soft voices began to echo as if calling out to them one by one. One of the young men, the bravest, walked through the dark halls. He felt something watching him in the darkness, but his curiosity overcame the fear that was growing in his heart. As the night went on, the strange voices began to grow louder. Each whisper seemed to have a special meaning, calling out to the ambitious and curious young men. One of them, Aditya, felt the sensation of hearing a voice that was very clear, a woman's voice calling for help. He tried to follow the voice, but as he approached, the figure suddenly disappeared into the darkness. Worry began to creep into the group. When they regrouped, many of them began to express the same fear. They felt trapped by a greater force. The tension grew even more intense when the lights in the house suddenly flickered on, illuminating their faces with an eerie glow. In an instant, they felt a drastic drop in temperature, as if something unseen had come into their midst. Deciding not to get caught up in their fear, they went back to reading the journal. It turned out that the journal also mentioned the experiences of former residents who had been trapped by the negative influence of the house. Those who did not keep their promises would lose everything, not just their wealth, but also their souls and family. Every sentence in the journal was like a warning that must be heeded immediately. As they tried to devise a plan to escape, Joko, one of the young men, suddenly screamed when he saw a black shadow pass in front of him. The shadow had no clear shape, but all the young men immediately felt its presence. They tried to calm Joko down, but Rina, the most sensitive girl among them, felt the greater pressure. She began to cry and scream, causing everyone to shake. Suddenly, a loud knocking sound echoed from above, and all attention was drawn there. Despite their fear, they decided to explore the upper floor. As they climbed the stairs, the hallway became narrower and darker. The walls of the house seemed to close in, as if they wanted to trap them forever. When they reached the top, they found a way to a new attic. There, piles of wooden boxes and other antiques lay. In the middle of the pile, they found an old locked box. Curiosity got the better of them again. They tried to open it, and when they finally did, a terrible stench emerged. Inside were a number of personal belongings belonging to the missing villagers, as if this house held a treasure bound by a very heavy curse. Reading deeper into the box, they found a medal and pieces of letters explaining the ritual of Pesugihan. Apparently, those who try to perform the ritual without understanding the consequences will fall into the trap of darkness. One of the letters reads, "Wealth will come right if you call and give a sacrifice. But the soul that will be taken is not Sirikaja. It must be the closest one, the beloved." The tension multiplied as they discussed this. Some of them began to think that they should get out of the house immediately, while others began to be tempted by the wealth they could get. Secretly, Aditya began to remember his family, which he considered precious. This is where the tension peaked, between morality and overwhelming desire. As the night deepened, one of them found an altar in the corner of the attic. There were torn candles and strange symbols carved on the walls. In the middle of the altar, there was a small statue that resembled a scary figure. They thought that this altar was the place where the forbidden rituals were previously performed. No one wanted to take responsibility. All chose to remain silent, but guilt seeps into them. When Aditya tries to speak up to set things straight, Joko, full of ambition, retorts, "We're here. Now's the time to seize this opportunity, not run away from fear." The shock of Joko's words shakes the group. They feel stranded between the right decision and its possible repercussions. Doubt begins to creep in. Are they brave enough to face the looming darkness? As Aditya insists on leaving the house and discussing ways to escape, Joko becomes more obsessed with the idea of performing the ritual. Meanwhile, Reena feels something strange. She feels as if someone is calling her to stay. Mutual suspicion begins to fill the space between them. Each young man has a different view, between choosing to stay or run away, fighting against their own desires. The situation becomes more complicated as the night gets darker. Strange voices appear again, making it difficult to think clearly. Aditya, who feels the greatest responsibility because he is the leader of the group, tries to control and calm the atmosphere, but the deeper he digs, the more unexpected things appear. In the midst of the conflict, they discover more about the lives of the missing villagers. The terrible trough and the sadness that enveloped the place broke Aditya's heart. At the peak of his emotions, he shouted, telling his friends to reflect on what had happened to their missing family and friends. However, Joko was unaffected. In his obsession with wealth, he began to look for ways to carry out the ritual himself, intending to become rich and attract the attention of his other friends. As Joko begins to make preparations, a fierce clash ensues. Joko, who is crazed, tries to convince his colleagues that wealth is within his reach and ignores all warnings coming from Aditya. As the clash escalates, Reena finally expresses her desire to leave. She feels another movement, a kind of attachment from imprisoned spirits, and she begins to scream in fear, crying for help. In that moment, the tension created by Joko tries to calm Reena, but in fact it only makes things worse. In the increasingly tense night, Joko decides to perform a ritual at the altar without telling the others. In his desire to prove that wealth and power can be obtained, he ignores all the warnings he has experienced previously. Bringing items and equipment from the box he found, Joko takes on the role of ritual leader. He feels that the promised wealth will lift them all out of the depths of financial uncertainty. Witnessing Joko's actions becomes increasingly alarming. Reena, who is most sensitive to the energy around her, immediately senses the presence of an entity in the darkness. She argues that performing the ritual is not the solution. It will invite more problems. However, her words were rejected by Joko, who was increasingly sucked into ambition and greed. As Joko began to perform his ritual, the tension that built up caused Sari, one of the young men, to be choked by this betrayal. In her desperation to stop Joko, Sari attacked him. An argument broke out, with Joko trying to insist that this ritual would change their lives. But everything became even more chaotic when Reena felt an evil energy starting to gather around the altar. The ritual that Joko was doing was getting out of control, where he started to read the spells written on the wall out loud. In an instant, the darkness turned against him. Shadows from the past began to materialize, small fragments that approached each of the young men, and at that moment everyone felt extreme fear hit. When the noisy and panicky sounds occurred in the ritual, Joko suddenly fell into a shaking body. He was pulled towards the altar as if the house wanted him. Reena shouted at everyone to stop the ritual, but no one heard. In an instant, the energy around them became increasingly stiff and fragile. In panic, the other youths were forced to face what had now happened to their friend. The dark shadows that seemed to surround them overflowed, creating indescribable misery. Some members of the group fainted, while others tried to help Joko, who was trapped by an invisible force. In the darkness, Joko's screams echoed, "Help! What's happening?" At the same time, Reena tried to fight the evil influence, trying to reach Joko's soul. She shouted for all the youths to unite to stop this ritual before it was too late. Sari, who woke up from her fainting, tried to help Reena, but their efforts seemed in vain as the current of darkness grew stronger. Knowing that there was nothing else to do, Aditya made a difficult decision. Taking the items from the altar, he began to burn the letters from the ritual written on the wall. The heat of the flames attracted the attention of the entity, pushing the shadows away as the fire grew. Finally, the fire caused Joko to be free from the dark force that had trapped him. Confused, Joko shouted, "What are you doing? You're ruining everything." But Reena realizes that the house requires a sacrifice to free itself from its evil bond. And that means they must face the entity that guards the house for real. Unexpectedly, the fire begins to cause the evil shadows to strike back, transforming her soul and the negative energy's purpose into reality. As the atmosphere approaches chaos, all the young men run for a way out. In the chaos that ensues, they are suddenly locked in a dark illusion, where the walls of the house begin to shrink as shadows surround them. The walls seem to be filled with the screams of those who were once trapped inside the house. From these voices, they hear cries that someone must make a sacrifice, someone brave enough to end the curse. Reena, though confused, feels that their way out may lie in revealing everything that is buried deep within each of their souls. She begins to open up memories of people she lost, hopes from her childhood, desires she has always harbored. In her view, one of the darkest young men has a profound realization. He tells of his experiences, how he used to be trapped in debt, begging for his life to be fixed. One by one, the other young men contributed memories inspired by Reena's power. The evil force seemed to be answered, creating a moment where they could share their burdens and connect with the past. The screams of the surrounding voices receded, and with each revealed memory, they began to feel relief. Slowly, the negative current subsided and they felt the courage to fight back. The voices faded, but the darkness that enveloped them grew thicker. Without warning, black fingers resembling hands emerged from the walls, wanting to reach them as prey. They fought back with all their might, holding each other so as not to be separated. The realization began to grow in the group that only by uniting could they stop the entity. Aditya became the leader, leading his friends to the altar of his path. He encouraged them to share their hopes and ideals in life, something powerful to illuminate the darkness. Reena remembered her family life, who had to be protected, and the power of affection that binds. Above all, she asked them to try another way to open the doorway through hope. In the final moments, when the current of darkness seemed almost insurmountable, the strongest shadow emerged. The forms of previous victims appeared, souls tormented by greed. They shouted for the young group not to repeat the same mistakes. With a burning spirit, they tried to break through the boundaries of darkness. Aditya loudly shouted, "We will not obey the evil will. We choose our lives and our hopes." As the presence of the entity grew more intense, Reena saw ancient symbols on the walls. She believed the symbols were a way to banish the darkness. Fighting against her fear, she began to chant a spell inspired by the notes found in the journal. Reena's voice sounded full of anger and courage, as if lighting up the dark room again. At the same time, Sari began to dig deeper into the engraved symbols. She wrote down each letter and tried to put the meaning together in her mind. Thinking through logic and history, Sari echoed the desire to find a way to fight the entity that haunted the house. A short break gave them new strength. Aditya intended to combine everything they had learned. Through cooperation, they developed a new strategy, cutting down the darkness at the same time in a unique way. All united in raising their voices, they united against the darkness, one united movement. Like a wave, their voices flooded the house, destroying the aura of darkness. And at that moment, light began to seep from each of their souls, breaking through the space that the darkness held. The ceiling of the house shook and the shadows growled, imprisoned by the light that might bring hope. When the light went out, the shadow revealed itself in a similar face, a graceful figure, a woman accompanying the light. Reena realized it was a witness from the past, a remaining victim of the black magic. The woman looked beautiful, though her tears showed all the pain. "Do not follow in my footsteps. I am a warning," the woman said, her voice soft but firm. "Black magic is not a way to reach reality. The sadness that comes will never be erased. Save yourselves." The young men felt a sense of calm at the sight of the woman, and Reena vowed not to repeat the mistake. Holding each other's hands, they moved closer, pushing the flow of darkness back. The woman led them, embracing each other's souls, proving that there was hope at the edge of darkness. Reena dwelled in this moment, contemplating what it meant to have courage in the face of fear. She felt the burden in their souls begin to feel lighter. Flashbacks from the past appeared, sacrifices of love, pain, and longing. Not just to defeat the enemy, but to save the trapped souls. The struggle intensified as the shadow became more aggressive. With the combination of their strength and the woman's energy, they created a wave of light into the darkness. The young men felt a surge in their souls, a surge of energy to pursue freedom. Every sacrifice of a lost soul gave them new strength. Sometimes, as the light shone, the lost ones would appear for a few seconds, full of hope, promising not to leave them in the darkness. Aditya cried out for unity, grief, and hope, a source of unbroken strength. In that dark drama, the aura of love penetrated the boundaries, bringing light to fight the shadows. The entire house was enveloped in a challenge. The walls shook again, depicting the guts of both parties struggling, the entity that wanted to ensnare them and the trapped souls who wanted to be freed. As the moment seemed almost hopeless, one by one, they began to remember the situations in which they felt loved. The sacrifice of the last sentence became the key to unlocking everything. Each expression of gratitude, building a force that could not be stopped by the darkness. When the power of light is generated by love and hope, the shadows begin to fall. The echoing screams seem to burn the muskets that control their bodies and souls. In the final seconds, everything feels like spinning, and a battle arises between continuing to side with the darkness or continuing the fight for love and the beloved. In the back of her mind, Rina can see what is stored in her. Instincts, their sacrifices will fight the reflection of the investment of guilt. With united souls, they summarize the sincere desire to be together and consider each other as an inseparable part of the whole. Aditya remembers the beliefs they originally held. In his heart, he believes that with the power of their love they can destroy the burden of fear. With full sincerity, he begins to sing an introductory song that expresses hope. Once again, the bright flames begin to reflect their faces, leading them towards liberation. Rina and Aditya combine their strength, leading the shadows out of the dark space. In the final battle, the souls that have been trapped inside form a circle of light that envelops them with love as architecture. Finally, the atmosphere began to brighten as the entity began to break apart. The inspiring woman was now in the middle, guiding the way out. Her soft screams brought hope back. The people trapped inside the mirrors began to struggle, revealing their souls that were freed from the darkness. As they finally stood at the threshold of the exit, Aditya expressed his determination again. "We will not forget what happened in this house. We will be the fence for the next generation." He reiterated his promise to remember every lesson. In one precious moment, they embraced each other and felt their souls connect. The light warmed them, signifying that all sorrow would end. Facing the new morning, they emerged from the sacrificial house with a newfound sense of gratitude. Outside, the sunlight illuminated everything with warmth, seemingly erasing all traces of darkness. The once cursed house now became an inspiring backdrop for all that remained. Coming out of the experience, they vowed to settle in the village and share their story. Courage and hope built a new identity, fighting greater challenges. No longer trapped by momentary desires, they prioritized love and friendship. Aditya built a conference to educate other young people about the dangers of black magic and the importance of sincere relationships in brotherhood. Rina became an inspirational figure in the village, sharing her bitter experiences and how love could save them. In order to avoid repeating similar mistakes, the surviving young people created a monthly event in the village where they shared their life experiences. Honoring the lost souls, they held a ritual to ask for forgiveness from all those trapped. Rina and Aditya became people to rely on, forming strong bonds with the villagers. At the event, they also invited the new generation to share their hopes and friendship. With everyone coming together, they create a network of support and give each other new strength. Each encounter is filled with precious stories from the past and a spirit of not getting caught up in greed. The voices of those who have been lost guide their journey, creating a lasting reminder that love and hope can always overcome fear. As their journey continues, Rina finds love in Aditya. They support each other and promise not only to protect each other, but also to protect the village. With their growing love, they create new memories that will inspire future generations. As a couple, Rina and Aditya lead an anti-fraud and black magic campaign, educating the community about the value of honesty and solidarity. The right ingredients in friendship will last despite the temptation of quick riches. Their village becomes a guardian of good ideas, and many young people participate in love and friendship. Every lesson learned from the sacrificial house becomes a light for a new generation. As time goes by, their story spreads. The village remembers not only the haunted case in the sacrificial house, but also the lessons they use to protect people from the temptation of false wealth. Many children are born into harmonious environments, where living with bitter memories is just a note. Rena maintains a connection with the lost souls, leaving a place in her heart for them. Aditya, standing beside her, felt proud and grateful. They would be the next generation of guardians of the memories left behind, fulfilling their promise to never let the darkness enter again. On a quiet night, as the moon showed its smile, they gathered with the villagers on the stage to remember the souls lost. Stories of courage, hope, and love would continue to echo endlessly, creating an eternal legacy for all who loved. At the top of the journey, Rena and Aditya stand together with the village youth, planning a better future. They realize that they owe it to those who are trapped in greed and sacrifice. The power of love and care guides them on every honest step towards the future. The village is filled with new hope. Men and women, every soul plays an active role in creating a better life, no longer deceived by the temporary shine of wealth. By remembering the past, they prepare for the journey ahead, towards a brighter awakening. With this journey, their story becomes a legend that is told from generation to generation, giving new strength to face challenges and avoid the dark black magic of the sacrificial house. Rena and Aditya are proud like stars, shining on a full moon night, witnessing new life and endless opportunities in the hearts of the villagers, a place that nurtures stories of love and hope, above all the sadness of loss.